Hi and welcome back everyone. Welcome back to Reading Movies. Today is Judgment Day with Terminator 2 by Randall Frakes, based on a screenplay by James Cameron and Bill Wisher. Bill Wisher, as you may know, also co-wrote the novelisation for the first film with Randall Frakes, but this time he had no involvement with this sequel, but does have another cameo in this film as a bystander, as a photographer in the mall. Now, I bought this copy recently to replace the one that I owned years ago. This particular one is a Sphere Books second reprint from the same year, suggesting this is not surprisingly sold quite well in the UK. It was printed in the USA also by Bantam Spectra in 1991. I understand that a few years later Warner Books printed an edition in 1994 also. Now, I have to admit, I'm not a great fan of this film. Yes, I liked the movie in many ways. It was a good fun roller coaster of a film, and I'm not one to argue with the millions of you that do. It's just the concept of the T-1000 seemed too much like science fantasy, and just seemed a little bit unbelievable in my opinion. Impressive as the CGI was back then, it still doesn't look too real to me, too smooth and shiny. It hasn't really aged well either, but I do not let it detract too much from the enjoyment that I got from this film anyway. For this book, Randall Frakes was involved in the early brainstorming sessions and credits the detailed script written by Cameron and Bill Wisher in helping the writing of this book. So, on to the book, where I will highlight the differences from the movie. So the usual spoiler warnings apply. Now, I understand that some of these scenes were reinstated in future DVD and Blu-ray editions, either as part of the movie or as deleted scenes, but none were available to the public during its release in 1991, and was only experienced in book form. The book starts off where the first movie ends, with Sarah in a Jeep planning her new life with the unborn John Connor, and knowing that the photo that she now holds, purchased from the Mexican kid, will be the one that she will give to John so that he can pass it on to Kyle Reese. In the book, she contemplates that Kyle never knew that she was in fact thinking of him in that very photo, and that he died not knowing this. And now we get to probably the biggest inclusion in the book that was not featured in any of the films or any of its previous releases. It then cuts to the future war in 2029, a scene not filmed due to budget restraints, where we read about John and his soldiers finally defeating Skynet and by attacking its base and shutting it down. We're treated to a scene where we follow a 17-year-old soldier fighting in the war, and we're introduced to the Silverfish Hunter Killers and the Centurion HKs during this part, as well as a scene which would have involved the future Terminator played by Franco Columbo, seen in the first movie, who attacks the base in Kyle Reese's flashback where he loses the photo. Once the base is captured, the book covers John's difficult decision to pick a soldier to go back. This is handled very well in the book, covering his internal conflict and pain that is caused by explaining that John had only 5 conversations with Reese, choosing to keep himself distanced from him. It explains that the first couple of times that he met Kyle, he didn't even realise it was him and his actual future father. This and other parts of this chapter cover John's character well, and throughout the book, Frakes brings to life John Connor better than in the movie. It highlights the differences between John and Sarah, his mother, and how he comes to view the Terminators in a different light to her. Hers being understandable as in a form of pure hatred of them and the people involved in creating them. You get a sense that it's Sarah's paranoid hostility and aggression is what unintentionally pushes John to be the thoughtful, kinder, understanding, sober soul, allowing him to be the man he becomes in the future, and not just a product of Sarah's teaching. He grows up not to be like her. Reading the book, it does appear that there are a couple of dialogue parts in the book where there is some discrepancy of the dates and ages of John Connor. Some of the dialogue does seem unreal for a 10-year-old John to say. I think in the film John is in fact 13 years old, as per Edward Furlong's age, and set in 1995 and not 1991, as in the book. But this book makes a note of him being aged 10. There is, of course, the addition of most of the most famous deleted scene featuring Sarah's hallucination dream of Kyle visiting her in the institution cell, and their conversation. We are also treated to a complete history of the creation of Cyberdyne, including the name of the previous factory at the end of Terminator, Kleinhaus, in case you're wondering. We get the story of the two workers who found the Terminator remains and how they left their employ to start alone, using the T-800 parts. One of these founder members dies, and the other one remains and hires a young genius named Dyson to work on it with him. We get a short biography of Dyson too, plus some scenes of his home life with his family. Another addition we get is the T-1000, still disguised as John's stepmom, Janelle, walking out into the garden to kill the dog, Max, and realising its name on the collar, that he has in fact been tricked in the earlier phone conversation. It is revealed that the T-1000 can also read computers and magnetic discs by placing its hand over them, instantly processing the information held on them. This is what he's doing in a deleted scene on the newer Blu-ray releases. We also learn that the T-1000 molecules have a range of about 14 kilometres in order for them to rejoin each other and return to full size. After the rescue of Sarah from the mental institution, we get a short scene of Dr. Silberman being wheeled away on a trolley, babbling away about the T-1000, and presumably on his way to be incarcerated as well. In a later scene, when they're trying to remove Arnie's learning chip, we're also treated to a scene where Sarah then tries to destroy it, but is stopped by John. We also learn that John Connor can also speak fluent Spanish, and does so during the scene when they meet Enrique, the arms dealer, and when he introduces Arnie as his Uncle Bob. At around 3/4 of the way through the book, we learn that Skynet, in fact, had doubts about the T-1000 creation, but gambles at the final microsecond before it is shut down, in a bid to stop John Connor, and sends the T-1000 back to a different timeline, in case its 1984 plan does not work out. Skynet questions the T-1000's longevity and its ability to process commands. The T-1000 malfunctioning scenes are also here in the book. After being crystallized in liquid nitrogen, shattered and thawed, the T-1000 struggles to hold its shape, with its feet sticking to the floor and the camouflage beginning to glitch, with colours and images transferring to its hands and legs whenever it touched a surface. The ending differs too. In the book, the Arnie T-800 merely jumps into the molten steel before raising its thumb, which is in contrast to the sadder and realistic film ending, where it is learned that a Terminator cannot self-terminate, and needs the help of Sarah to do the final deed, much to the heartache of John. Interestingly, in this book, it explains afterwards John retrieves Arnie's lost arm caught up in the machinery during the T-1000 fight scene, and he also throws that in the molten steel too. Something not shown in the movie version I saw, and many people speculating at the time during the release of the film that the arm would be used in another further sequel. The final difference to the original film is well known, in which we get an epilogue featuring an older Sarah Connor in 2029, reflecting on past events and how Judgment Day does not happen. Skynet does not get built. Instead, she is watching John playing with her grandchild, and it is revealed that he is now a US Senator, closing the story and ruling out any other sequels. So if you're a fan of this film, I thoroughly recommend that you read it. If you find or know of any other differences I've missed, please share them below in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.